So the topics which I will be taking would be multiple fold, and this is mainly related with the calcium balance. So there are many factors which affects calcium balance. There are endogenous mediator, there are release of ions and neurotransmitters in the body, and those are available in adequate and optimal amount in the body. Any alteration of either neurotransmitter or the elements or any endogenous releases will cause some or the other type of disorder or disease. There are factors, external factor or internal factor, which may affect the balance of that particular endogenous release. Now here on, in today's class, we will discuss the factors, the external factor or the internal factor which affect the calcium balance. Under hormone section, we have already seen that there are hormones released from the anterior part of the pituitary gland and the posterior part of the pituitary gland. And those releases are controlled by hypothalamus also. In here, the hormone which is responsible for the control of calcium is parathyroid hormone. Now, parathyroid hormone is not controlled by the pituitary or the hypothalamus. It is controlled itself by the calcium level in the body. There are external factors, especially the drugs, which affect the calcium balance. And those drugs are usually given in the disorder caused by increased or decreased calcium level in the body. So by the end of this chapter, what you should be able to say? I mean, what should be the learning objectives? See, by the end of this chapter, you should be able to say about calcium, what form it is present in the body, what are the factors which affects the calcium release. Also, you should be able to say about the parathyroid hormone, how it affects the calcium level in the body, how it affects the calcitriol level in the body, how it affects the phosphate level in the body, what is the effect on the intestine of the parathyroid hormone, what is the effect on the kidney, and what is the effect on the bone. Also, you should be able to say what are the drugs which affects this calcium balance, and that includes the bisphosphonates. So the mechanism of action related to the bisphosphonate you should be able to say. Also, you would be saying about hypercalcemia and hypocalcemia. What happens in hypercalcemia, hypocalcemia, what happens in hypervitaminosis D especially, and hypovitaminosis, and so on. So we will see the details of all these things in the subsequent slides. So to introduce, we should be knowing what calcium is and what are the various roles of calcium in the body. Now, calcium is especially present in the body in elemental form. Elemental, that is cationic form, which is Ca2+. Ca2+, it is denoted as Ca2+. This is cationic form, and in this form, this is present in the body. Now, there are many significance of this calcium. As we already know, calcium is an integral part of our body, especially the bone and the teeth. 98% of the calcium is found in the bone and teeth. Otherwise, calcium is very much important for the current flow across the excitable membrane. So the impulse transmission, it is very important. For fusion and a release of storage vesicle, it is very much important. You must be remembering when we discussed the release of acetylcholine or norepinephrine from the storage vesicle. What happens in there? There is storage and synthesis and storage of this neurotransmitter in the vesicle. Now, when it is stored, what causes the release of those neurotransmitters? There is calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and there is the influx of the calcium. Those calcium causes destabilization of storage vesicle. This destabilization of storage vesicle causes the movement of storage vesicle towards the membrane, where it fuses, and then there is a release of the neurotransmitter. So in that way, calcium is very helpful. Calcium is also helpful in second messenger system. We have seen again in pharmacodynamic, like the CAMP pathway, IP3-DAG pathway, the calcium is an important part over there also. Also, calcium is very important for blood coagulation. Then it is very important for remodeling of the skeleton. What is remodeling of the skeleton, or what is the remodeling of the bone? We will see in the subsequent slide. This is nothing but the action of the osteoclast and osteoblast on the bone. Then intracellular free calcium. The presence of intracellular free calcium is lesser than extracellular calcium. The extracellular calcium is in millimole, whereas intracellular calcium is in nanomole. So it is present around 100 nanomole. And this concentration is maintained. This concentration is maintained especially by calcium ATPases and sodium calcium exchanger. So these are the exchanger which are responsible for maintaining the intracellular free calcium of concentration about 100 nanomole. Now, when we see the sex-wise difference, men contains around 1300 gram of calcium, whereas women contains around 1000 gram of calcium. And more than 99% is present in bone and teeth. Now, this differs from book to book. Some says 98%. So, thing to say is that majority of the calcium is present in the bone and teeth. So, 99%, more than 99% is present in bone and teeth. Now, what about the normal serum calcium concentration? Normal serum calcium concentration varies at the range of 8.5 to 10.4 milligram per deciliter. And this can be in ionized form, protein bound form, or complex form. Now, which part or which type of calcium is diffusible, which is not diffusible, I'll show in subsequent slide. The very next slide. Then the requirement of calcium for adolescent, 1300 milligram of calcium per day is required, whereas for adult there is a requirement of 1000 milligram per day. So this is what I was talking about in my previous slide. This is the pool of calcium in the serum. As I told, it varies from a range of 8.5 to 10. So we take as 10 milligram per deciliter, and this equals to 2.5 millimole. Now, out of this, as I told, it is found in ionized, complex, and protein bound form. Now, 50% is ionized form and 10% is complex form. This complex form is especially with the anions. It makes complexes with anion. And then 40% is protein bound form, which is non-diffusible. So we see over here that only the ionized form and then complex form with small anion, they are available for diffusion, and thus it is called as diffusible calcium, whereas protein bound form is non-diffusible and it cannot diffuse inside the cell. Now, calcium absorption and excretion. How is calcium absorbed and how is it excreted? Now, calcium is mostly absorbed from small intestine, and vitamin D plays a very important role for the calcium absorption. Vitamin D dependent transport is available in proximal duodenum, which causes active absorption of calcium. There is facilitated diffusion also of calcium, and that occurs through other part of the small intestine, leaving the proximal duodenum. Now, when the calcium is absorbed, calcium has to be excreted out also. So, there is a balance between the absorption and the excretion. Usually, it is equal. So, we can say that calcium absorption and excretion is balanced. They are counterbalanced by an obligatory daily intestinal calcium loss of 150 milligram per day. We will see later on how and in which way and how much quantity it is excreted in feces and in urine. Broadly, we can say that the efficiency of intestinal calcium absorption is inversely proportional to the calcium intake, which means if we take a diet which is low in calcium, this will cause compensatory increase in the absorption of calcium, and this happens by the help of vitamin D. So you say here that it is inversely proportional to calcium intake. In simpler form, you can say less is the calcium intake, more is the calcium absorption. More is the calcium intake, less is the calcium absorption, and this absorption takes place through vitamin D. Now we have urinary calcium excretion. The quantity which is filtered at the glomerulus per hour is around 9,000 milligram, or say 9 gram. The amount which is absorbed, which is reabsorbed, comes around 98%. Now when 98% comes, it is something around 8,850 milligram. Again, this I will show in figure form in the next slide. This is what I was talking about. This slide tells you about turnover of calcium. Now let's assume there is intake of calcium and then 800 milligram comes in the intestine. From here 300 milligram is absorbed. And how much is remaining? It's 500 milligram over here in the intestine. This 300 milligram equals to absorption and release from the bone, which means 300 milligram is absorbed and 300 milligram is secreted from the bone. So that equals. That again is through osteoblastic activity and osteoclastic activity. Now 150 milligram is the endogenous loss. This endogenous loss of 150 milligram of calcium goes back in the intestine, which makes 500, which was already there in the intestine, plus 150, which makes 650 milligram, and that is excreted out through feces. Kidney also I discussed in the previous slide. The filtration which occurs in the kidney is 9,000 milligram of calcium, out of which 8,850 milligram is reabsorbed. So how much is remaining? It is 150 milligram, which is excreted out in the urine. Now coming to calcium absorption. Calcium is reabsorbed in the body, and this reabsorption process or absorption process is regulated mainly by parathyroid hormone. Also, it is affected by the filtered sodium and diuretic agents. The effect of diuretic agents on the calcium we have already discussed in diuretic chapter. Here, in short, I will tell what is the effect of diuretic, mainly the high ceiling diuretic and the thiazide diuretic on the calcium level. Just to recall the classification of diuretic, there are mainly three types. The first is high ceiling diuretic or high efficacy diuretic, or otherwise is also called as loop diuretics. Then the second is medium efficacy diuretic or thiazide like diuretic. And the third is low ceiling diuretic. The example of high ceiling diuretic are ithacranic acid and furosemide or furosemide, whereas thiazide, chlorothiazide, chlorothalidol. Low efficacy diuretic, we have mannitol as osmotic diuretic. We have potassium sparing diuretics, which affects the potassium level, which stops the release of excretion of potassium, that is spironolactone. So this is the classification of diuretic. The main effect on calcium reabsorption is of high ceiling diuretic and the thiazide diuretic. High ceiling diuretics causes increased calcium excretion. It causes increased calcium excretion. So there would be hypercalciuria or hypocalcemia. Whereas thiazide diuretic causes increased sodium excretion but causes decrease in the calcium excretion. Decrease or diminish in the calcium excretion. That causes hypocalciuria or hypercalcemia. So this is the effect of the high ceiling diuretic and thiazide diuretic on the calcium reabsorption. Regarding parathyroid hormone, we will see in the coming slides. So in what way it is given, the calcium? Calcium is usually given as a dietary supplement or is given in the tablet form or parenteral form. Through vitamin D absorption is also there, and it is used mainly in osteoporosis case. Now, I'll discuss about the parathyroid hormone. Before starting parathyroid hormone itself, we'll discuss the parathyroid anatomy. Before knowing the parathyroid anatomy, you should be knowing about the thyroid anatomy. Anatomy of thyroid. Because the location of parathyroid is very much dependent upon the location of thyroid. So what is the anatomy of thyroid? Here we can see in the figure, this is thyroid gland, which is the H shape you can say, or you can say it's a butterfly shape. And it is found in the low on the front of the neck. And it lies below the Adam's apple along the front of the windpipe. So it is at the front of the windpipe. And it has two lobes, this right lobe and then the left lobe. And there is a bridge in between, which is called isthmus. Knowing this thyroid anatomy, we should move to parathyroid anatomy. So parathyroid gland, it is present at the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. In both the lobe, that is right lobe and left lobe, there is presence of this parathyroid gland. And there are 4 number of parathyroid gland. It is at the posterior part. Here you can see this is the transparent figure where these are the parathyroid gland which is present at the posterior part and also at the lateral part of the lobes. This is present at the external part, but this is present under the sheath only. So normal human, most of the people have 4 parathyroid gland, 2 at each side. And from this hormone only there is release of parathyroid hormone. Now coming to physiology of calcium and phosphate regulation. You must have gone through this physiology of calcium and phosphate in the first year physiology class also. But to understand the subsequent slide and the mechanism of action, we should just recall back the whole physiology of calcium and phosphate. So majority of the text or majority of the element taken in my slide is from Goodman and Gilman. A little is there from Sharma and Sharma too. So this particular figure is taken from Goodman and Gilman. So we have parathyroid gland over here. So there are 4 dots present, 2 at each side of this arrow. So this represents parathyroid gland. Parathyroid gland causes the release of parathyroid hormone. Hope this is clear. Parathyroid hormone, this releases parathyroid hormone. Now, what is the role of parathyroid hormone? Parathyroid hormone causes the calcium reabsorption, as well as parathyroid hormone causes calcitriol conversion. Calcitriol is nothing but 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D. And there is a series of steps involved in the synthesis of 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D or the calcitriol. Like this formation is through 25-hydroxy 1-alpha hydroxylase through this enzyme, which causes conversion of one part to the calcitriol. I'll show you the conversion of the mediators to calcitriol in my next slides. So parathyroid hormone inhibits the calcium reabsorption, and parathyroid hormone causes increased calcitriol. So it causes increased calcium reabsorption and it causes increased calcitriol synthesis or formation or conversion. As well as parathyroid hormone causes decreased phosphate reabsorption. Decreased phosphate reabsorption. Now, when there is more formation of calcitriol, there is negative feedback and it inhibits the parathyroid hormone to inhibit the release of parathyroid hormone. Then when calcitriol synthesis occurs, formation occurs, this calcitriol of vitamin D causes the absorption of calcium from the intestine. This is the major thing which should be present to cause the calcium absorption from the intestine. Also, it helps in the phosphate absorption. Then calcitriol causes the uptake of calcium in the bone also. Then there is a factor called fibroblast growth factor 23. It is named as fibroblast growth factor 23. Now this is released from the bone. Now what is the effect of this? What is the use of this? What it does is fibroblast growth factor 23 inhibits the parathyroid hormone and it will reduce the release of parathyroid hormone through parathyroid gland. And FGF23 also causes inhibition of enzyme which is called 25-hydroxy 1-alpha hydroxylase to convert vitamin D or calcitriol. So it inhibits the enzyme involved in the formation of calcitriol. Hope this figure is pretty clear. I'll tell you once again. There is parathyroid gland which causes the release of parathyroid hormone. Now parathyroid hormone causes calcium reabsorption. Also, it causes calcitriol synthesis, the conversion of mediator to the calcitriol. The parathyroid hormone causes decreased phosphate reabsorption also. Increased amount of calcitriol will cause the negative feedback to parathyroid, so that there is a lesser release of parathyroid hormone. Now calcitriol is very useful, very much necessary for the calcium reabsorption through the intestine as well as for the phosphate absorption. And calcitriol stimulates bone and causes the more uptake of calcium. Now there is a factor called fibroblast growth factor 23 which is released from bone. It causes inhibition of the synthesis of calcitriol or conversion to calcitriol, and also it inhibits the parathyroid gland to secrete lesser parathyroid. Here, this is PTHR, this is parathyroid hormone receptors, which acts on the kidney to give this effect. And there is a fibroblast growth factor receptor or CLOTho, and we have sodium dependent phosphate transporter protein. This is sodium dependent phosphate transporter protein, which causes the calcium absorption and then phosphate reabsorption and all. Now coming to the synthesis of parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone is synthesized as pre-proparathyroid hormone, and this is a peptide containing 115 amino acids. From this amino acid, there is cleavage of 25 amino acid in the endoplasmic reticulum that converts to proparathyroid hormone, which contains 90 amino acid. Now again, there is a cleavage of 6 amino acid in the Golgi complex, and then it results in the parathyroid hormone, which ultimately contains 84 amino acid. So it is obtained from, or it is synthesized from, or converted from pre-proparathyroid, which contains 115 amino acid. This 115 amino acid is cleaved, so 25 amino acid is released, and then in the endoplasmic reticulum, and then that result in formation of proparathyroid hormone, which contains 90 amino acid. There is again a cleavage of some amino acid, which is 6, and that occurs in Golgi complex to form parathyroid hormone, which finally contains 84 amino acid, and that is released by parathyroid gland in the blood. Now we will see what is the effect of parathyroid hormone on calcium. So calcium is the main focus throughout the chapter. Parathyroid hormone, as I told you, it's a polypeptide hormone containing 84 amino acid, and it regulates plasma calcium. How? There are 3 major ways. The first is it affects bone resorption or formation, bone resorption and formation, parathyroid hormone via this pathway, parathyroid hormone, and then formation of calcitriol causes the resorption or formation. So why I have written resorption and formation? Because the osteoclastic activity and osteoblastic activity are very much interlinked. The other way is renal calcium excretion and reabsorption. So there is more of calcium reabsorption, and thus there will be lesser of calcium excretion. So through this process also the parathyroid hormone regulates calcium. Then the third is calcitriol synthesis. Calcitriol synthesis, which causes gastrointestinal calcium absorption. So we have 3 ways through which parathyroid hormone regulates plasma calcium, which affect the bone resorption and formation through osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity. Then we have renal calcium excretion and absorption. More of calcium is reabsorbed and lesser is excreted out. And then through calcitriol synthesis, which causes more of calcium absorption through the intestine. Now we have physiological function. What is the physiological function of parathyroid hormone? This maintains a constant concentration of calcium in the extracellular fluid. In the beginning only I told the extracellular fluid, the calcium level is millimolar form. And this is present in the cartilage, extracellular fluid or organs like cartilage, vascular smooth muscles, placenta, liver, pancreatic islet, brain, dermal fibroblast, and lymphocytes. And how these parathyroid hormone act? This act by binding with the receptor. Pharmacology is all about a receptor and receptor mediated action. So parathyroid hormone binds with the parathyroid hormone 1 receptor, PTH receptor 1. So PTH1 receptor or PTH or PTHRP, which is parathyroid hormone related protein receptor. Also, there is another type which is PTH2 receptor, which is present in the vascular tissue, brain, pancreas, and placenta. And what are the secondary mechanism which is involved in the action of parathyroid hormone after binding with PTH receptor? So this is linked with the GS type and GQ type. So you can say that this is G protein coupled receptor action. The action of parathyroid hormone is also a G protein coupled receptor action. So that's why I always say that the pharmacodynamic part is very important. The G protein coupled receptor type, the secondary messenger system, the second messenger system, and all. Hope you remember what is GS and GQ. Just for the flashback, we have GS type, like it contains 3 subunits: alpha, beta, and gamma subunit, right? So when there is stimulation of GS type, there is dissociation of beta and gamma, and there is conversion of GTP to GDP, and only alpha subunit remains with the GTP, sorry, G protein. Now this causes stimulation of adenylyl cyclase. Adenylyl cyclase will cause increased formation of cAMP, right? Increased formation of cAMP. cAMP formation will cause stimulation of formation of protein kinase A, which in turn will cause formation of respective protein, and then respective action is given. About GQ, if you remember, it has something to do with IP3 and DAG, right? GQ is through IP3 and DAG pathway. So there is formation of IP3. IP3 causes the increased release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum and all. And then there is the cell specific action. And the presence of GS type and GQ type is also very cell specific. Now we have a regulation of secretion. So as I told, that parathyroid gland is not regulated by hypothalamus or pituitary. The release of parathyroid hormone is based on the level of the calcium. Whenever there is lesser calcium, then PTH secretion increases. Upon increase in PTH secretion, these effects occurs, right? Increased absorption and all. So when there is lesser of calcium, you need more of calcium. So for that, this stimulation of parathyroid gland occurs, and then there is release of parathyroid hormone, which causes increase in calcium level. Now, how it senses? The sensing of calcium level is done by calcium sensing receptors. So this is Ca is calcium, this is a sensing, and this is receptor. So we have calcium sensing receptor. It senses the calcium level. If there is lesser of calcium, it will say the parathyroid gland to release more of parathyroid hormone, and then action is given. If there is more, there will be inhibition of parathyroid hormone gland. Now this calcium sensing receptor also acts through GQ and GI. So it's again a GPCR action. So G protein coupled receptor action, it mediates, and it is again through GQ and GI. GQ I have already told. GI is the opposite of GS type, where there is inhibition of what? Inhibition of cyclic AMP by inhibition of adenylyl cyclase enzyme. GI is a type where again there is dissociation of beta and gamma subunit, and then alpha subunit is there, which causes inhibition of adenylyl cyclase and causes inhibition of CMP. CMP inhibition causes lesser formation of specific protein, and then effect is inhibited. Now, when there is more calcium occupancy by this receptor, will cause inhibition of PTH secretion, as I have already told. Whereas if the calcium sensing receptor are not occupied by the calcium, that means there is deficiency, and then this gland is stimulated, causing more of parathyroid secretion. We have, in case of what happens in case of hypocalcemia and hypercalcemia. So hypocalcemia, sustained hypocalcemia, this is important. In case of sustained hypocalcemia, there is induction of parathyroid hormone, or it may cause hypertrophy of parathyroid and hyperplasia of parathyroid. So this is dangerous. So we should not have sustained hypocalcemia. The transient hypocalcemia will cause the release or the stimulation of parathyroid. But in case of sustained hypocalcemia, hypertrophy appears or hyperplasia appears, where the parathyroid gland cannot work properly. Now, what is the effect on bone? So we have effect on bone. It is both catabolic and anabolic in nature. It is both catabolic as well as anabolic in nature. That means it helps in the formation of or absorption of calcium, and also it causes the calcium decrease. Okay. Again, in the first few slides only, I told it's based on the osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity. I will discuss in the later slides. Intermittent increased total number of active osteoblasts. This causes initiation of new remodeling unit. When there is intermittent increase in PTH, let's say increase in PTH, it causes activation of osteoblasts. It causes activation of osteoblasts, and this causes stimulation or initiation of newer remodeling unit. A newer cell line or bone line is formed. Whereas when there is chronic increase in PTH, see the difference: intermittent increase or the transient increase, and then chronic increase. In case of chronic increase in PTH level, there is osteoclastic stimulation. Say opposite is there, osteoclastic stimulation. Here, intermittent or transient increase, there is osteoblastic activation. Here, osteoclastic activation occurs, and that causes the release of calcium from the bone matrix to blood. Okay, osteoclast, obviously, when osteoclastic activity appears, we'll see how it causes the release of calcium from the bone matrix to the blood, and this way there is more of calcium in the extracellular fluid. So as I told, it has both effect. The intermittent or transient effect is the activation of osteoblast, whereas chronic effect is activation of osteoclast. Now this is a very important slide, which will help you to understand the whole chapter of parathyroid and drugs affecting parathyroid gland and drugs affecting the calcium level. So both the figures are taken from Goodman and Gilman. This figure is taken from 13th edition, whereas this figure is taken from 12th edition. So first we will understand the second figure, then we will come back to first figure and then again to second figure. See, there is a bone and there is a bone lining. Okay, due to some factor, we will discuss what are those some factor. Now, due to some factor, there is the stimulation of osteoclastic activity. Osteoclastic activity. In the previous slide, we saw that osteoclastic activity is increased to the chronic increase in the PTH level. So that you can just consider. So that causes the osteoclastic activation, and then there is the formation of this ruffled border. This is called the zigzag is called ruffled border. So there is formation of a ruffled border in the osteoclast. Okay, osteoclast, and this ruffled border will cause an excavation. There is a cavity formed in the bone. Okay, this causes a resorption, and this process is called resorption. When there is formation of cavity and then calcium is released in the extracellular fluid, so this is called a resorption. Now there is a cavity formation. This will cause the osteoblast induction. Now the body will sense that something wrong is happening. So now osteoblast induction appears. Then this causes the relining, bone relining, and there is induction and osteoblast rebuilding, and this causes the newer bone line. Here I have shown how the osteoclast converts to a ruffled border osteoclast. Now we have the osteoclast itself comes from the osteoblast itself. Now osteoblast or stromal cell are having Ra and Ka, which is receptor for activating nuclear factor Kb or kappa B ligand. So this is the name of the ligand. Just make sure this is a ligand. Okay, this is not a receptor. This is a ligand. So this is a receptor for activating nuclear factor kappa B ligand, which is present on the osteoblast. Now there is osteoclast precursor, which is inactive as such, and there is present of this receptor for activating nuclear factor. This receptor for activating nuclear factor kappa. Now, when there is formation of complex, then what happens? There is formation of osteoclast. This ruffle border, multinucleated ruffle border osteoclast is formed, and then this dissociates as inactive compound. Now, formation of this will cause the resorption in the bone, and then that will cause the induction of osteoblast, and then this cycle goes on. And this process is known as bone remodeling, and it's a cyclic process, and that's why it is called as bone recycling, bone remodeling cycle. Now, there is a compound called OPG, which is osteoprodegrine. Now, this opposes the action of this thing, so it decreases the formation of osteoclast. That means it will causes lesser of resorption. So I'll say you everything in fast once again, just to make you understand better. There is a bone lining. I'm talking about osteoclastic activity and osteoblastic activity, the cell cycle or the cycle of bone remodeling. So what is that? There is a bone and there is a bone lining. Okay, so because of some reason there is induction of osteoclast. Okay. Now osteoclast, there is formation of this ruffle border. How? Through this process. Okay, formation of this ruffle border. This ruffle border will cause excavation in the bone and form a cavity and causes increased extracellular release of calcium. Extracellular release of calcium, or more of calcium goes in the extracellular fluid. Now this causes a cavity which causes induction of osteoblast, and then new bone lining appears. This osteoclast ruffle border formation, what is the process? We have osteoblast or a stromal cell where there is presence of receptor for activating nuclear factor kappa B, which is a ligand, and that binds with RANK, which is present in the osteoclast precursor, and because of this binding, there is formation of multinucleated osteoclast with ruffle border, and then this dissociates as inactive compound. There is OPG called osteoprotegrine. It causes inhibition of action of osteoclast. So this is another figure taken from Sharma and Sharma, which shows the same thing. So I don't know whether you have anytime seen the Goodman and Gilman. So I have taken this figure. So we have osteoclast precursor having this RANK receptor. Now upon binding with this RANK ligand from osteoblast, this causes differentiation and then formation of osteoclast with ruffle border, right? Ruffle border. This formation. Now the effect of this can be controlled by PTH and calcitriol, and this PTH causes stimulation of osteoblast, and as well as it causes stimulation of osteoclastic differentiation and the formation of ruffle border of the osteoblast also. What is the effect of calcitonin and other mediators? We have calcitonin, which inhibits the osteoclast, and we have estrogens, selective estrogen receptor modulators, and bisphosphonates, which also inhibits the osteoclast activity. So these are all helpful in maintaining the osteoblastic activity or maintaining the calcium concentration in the bone. Lesser the estrogen, more is the chance of osteoporosis. So if more estrogen is there, that will inhibit the osteoporosis or prevent the osteoporosis. This is again taken from Sharma and Sharma only. So Just to tell you in brief, we have parathyroid gland over here. There is formation of parathyroid hormone, the secretion of parathyroid hormone, and this formation of parathyroid hormone is from pre-proparathyroid, which converts to proparathyroid and then parathyroid hormone. From this, it is released. Parathyroid hormone is released. What are the effects? This causes increased bone reabsorption, and calcium moves from bone to blood. Then we have the increased calcium reabsorption and increased phosphate excretion from kidney. So it's like a renal effect and causes the release of calcitriol from kidney. Now, this increased resorption will cause increased resorption. It's not reabsorption. It is increased resorption will cause higher calcium level. Here also increased calcium reabsorption and increased phosphate excretion from kidney will cause increased calcium level in the serum. Release from release of calcitriol from kidney, what it will cause? It will cause increased absorption of calcium and phosphate from the intestine. We have seen in the previous figure also. This will cause again increase in serum calcium level. Now, when there is increased serum calcium level, it has to be decreased, right? So this causes a series of steps, stimulation of series of steps. What are those? This causes stimulation of C gland of thyroid, C cells of thyroid gland, and that causes the calcitonin release. This calcitonin release will causes decreased bone resorption, decreased bone resorption. So because of decreased bone resorption, the calcium moves from blood to bone. It will move from blood to bone, and then also there is increased excretion of calcium, and phosphate from the kidney. So when excretion is increased and bone resorption is decreased, so we get lower calcium level, less than 8 milligram. So this is the normal calcium level. So lower calcium level. Now, when there is lower calcium level, this will cause inhibition, feedback inhibition. This will cause inhibition of calcitonin release, right? Also, it will cause stimulation of parathyroid hormone, so that there is increased serum calcium. So this is interlinked. The optimal level has to be maintained. So whenever there is increased release, some series of steps occur to inhibit it. When there is inhibition, the series of steps occur to increase. So this thing is over. Now PTH release, there is conversion of vitamin D to its active form, which is calcitriol. I'll show it over here. The skin, upon exposure to sunlight, UV light, there is the conversion of 7-dehydrocholesterol to cholecalciferol, which is D3, and that converts to vitamin D3 in the liver. Vitamin D3 causes conversion of vitamin D3 converts to 25-hydroxy D3, which is calciferol, and then this in kidney happens. There is conversion of 25-hydroxy vitamin D3 to 125-dihydroxy vitamin D3, which is calciferol. Now this is stimulated by parathyroid hormone. In the previous figures also I have told, the parathyroid hormone causes the increased formation of calcitriol, increased synthesis, increased conversion to active form of calcitriol. But this parathyroid hormone can be inhibited by, or is inhibited by, fibroblast growth factor 23. The same figure was seen in the Goodman and Gilman figure also. So what is bone remodeling? Bone remodeling is a continuous process of breakdown and renewal. It's a continuous process of breakdown. That's why it is called as cycle by bone remodeling unit. So it's a physical or biochemical signal. What it causes? Some physical and biochemical signal will cause recruitment of marrow precursor cell to the bone surface, which result in their fusion into the characteristics multinucleated osteoclast. So the formation of osteoclast appears here, which causes a resorption or excavation or a cavity into the bone. I have discussed, I have explained everything previously. Now, osteoclast production is very much regulated by osteoblast. I have shown the figure how it happens. And the osteoblast derives cytokines like interleukin 1 and interleukin 6. This is the whole cycle. See, this is a stepwise manner. These are where the figure manner, figure representation, and these are the textual manner. So when in examination something like this comes, you have to show in this step pathway, or you can show through the figure also. In case of estrogen deprived situation, we have taken a situation where there is lesser of estrogen, so the calcium level will be altered. So there is a binding of this RANK ligand with the RANK, and then it causes the stimulation of formation of osteoclast RANK. So this RANK binding and then formation of osteoclast. Now activation of this mature osteoclast will causes differentiation of more osteoclast precursor, and then causes the excavation or formation of cavity in the bone. Now there is invasion of pre-osteoblast in the base of the resorption cavity. So when there is excavation occur, there is induction of osteoblast, and then there is osteoblast rebuilding, and new bone matrix appears, and then there is newer bone lining cells appears. Now when the thickness reaches to 20 micromole, then there is mineralization begins. From here, mineralization of the bone starts, and this goes on. So this goes from this step to this, and then appears here, and then again there is osteoclastic activity, then again osteoclastic activity. So this is a cycle which goes on. So I'll stop over here today. Next class we will see. Again, we will see the remodeling. I will recap it, and then we'll move to effect on kidney and other system. I will also teach about vitamin D and then bisphosphonates and all. So thank you so much.